Outside of New York, I don't think any other community had had that preponderance of people working in highly experimental modes which they themselves were inventing.
And the landscape was fabulous. There was a critic for the Village Voice at the time, who I knew a bit, who had said in print that there were only two independent theater traditions in the country. One was in New York and one was in San Francisco.
Really kind of wonderful combination of every night was a weird mix of, poetry, comedy, alternative theater, and all. For me, I kind of grew up going, that's what theater is.
There was a sense in which the culture here was so far ahead of the curve that what was treated as wildly radical experimental stuff in London and Paris and New York was behind the curve here.
Well, in some way, the 60s in other parts of the country kind of like wound down in the early 70s. And I think in San Francisco, they only became intensified in a way. Not intensified in continuing repetition of the same, but there was an integration of counterculture and left-wing politics into the very fabric of life here in a way that I don't think happened anywhere else.
The idea of possibility still existed, and people wanted to go to that city. And you wanted to go there and get away from the rest of the country, and therefore, so the people it attracted, I didn't say they're rebels, God knows, but they wanted to do something else.
Everyone was all kind of out there just trying stuff and doing it not with any idea other than just having a great time. I think that was kind of the idea initially. It was like, this is fun. It was not like, this would be on Broadway. No, this is fun. This is crazy.
I don't want to say that we were consciously thinking we're doing something revolutionary or something. We were just experimenting. The people who were involved in that community, that's what they wanted to do.
Particularly the Hawkeyes had an intense physicality where you saw the whole body being engaged in the act of storytelling. It wasn't a group of people sitting around a table arguing with each other. It was people using their entire physical selves.
The actor's tools were his whole being, not just neck up stuff, not just psychological drama, not just head stuff, but that the body had to be involved, and that it should be tuned. It should be like the whole instrument.
I think it's impossible to say what a Blake Street Hawkeye show was like.
We built shows from the moment. It was out of thin air. So each show was entirely different. If you look at the history of Hawkeye performances, every show was an entirely different experiment.
Let's do this show. Let's do this as a group. I said, well, what are we going to call it? Let's do it like an athletic event or something. Yeah, it's an athletic event. Like, well, what do we come from? Iowa. What are the Iowans? The Hawkeyes. And where do we live? Blake Street. Duh. And so the next 5 months we did kung fu and threw basketballs and smoked pot.
The Hawkeyes is also where Whoopi Goldberg came out of. She was a member of the Hawkeyes. And George Coates came out of the Hawkeyes. I think the first things he did were he did a solo show with Leonard Pitt, and then he did a solo show with John Dykers. And then he puts together this group with Paul Drescher and John Dykers and Rindy Eckert.
George Coates was doing new opera, partnering with people in Silicon Valley, doing incredible multimedia stuff. So I think being as the Bay Area is the home of Silicon Valley, multimedia stuff really got started here in the 80s as well.
He was using projections and images and helium balloons and all kinds of strange stuff. But wonderful stuff, and wonderfully evocative imagery he was using. And with new technology and challenging people to rise to the occasion.
He had a very, very fertile imagination and could see things that I really couldn't see as far as where my work could go.
The media support was also a critical part of that. There was Bernie Weiner at the Chronicle, who was almost to a fault a supporter of experimentation in theater. And he got people to come. And then the way he wrote about what we were doing was so enthusiastic that he got people to come with very open minds.
Press releases were coming into our offices all the time, and I can't tell you how many times the music critic or the dance critic or the art critic would come over to me and say, "Is this yours? Is this mine?" Because there was so much melding of forms.
All of these young creative people creating, and many of them are not recognizing the old genres, the old notion that this is dance, this is theater, this is classical music, this is jazz, blending all of that stuff together.
You know, click, 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 click. Times Square on New Year's Eve is
Snake Theater, founded by Chris Hardman and Laura Fauerbach, who had been supporting themselves making masks for the Renaissance fairs. And they would create these huge outdoor pieces with these enormous masks and sculptural kinds of pieces.
I thought it was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen in performance. Chris's work, Chris and Laura's work, because of the size of the gesture, because of the imagination brought to bear.
First it was Snake Theater, and then it became Antenna Theater. But Snake came out of 4 people who collaborated, and the first things we did were sort of agitprop productions about organizing the community.
At first they were doing things more in traditional theater context, but relatively quickly moved out of that context into more the site-specific and environmental.
The next one we did out here on the beach, and it was called Somewhere in the Pacific. It was a show about going off to World War II and girlfriend waiting and letters going back and forth and dancing fish, and punctuated by MacArthur getting up with a samurai sword and going out and swinging at the ocean as if he could conquer it, you know. And that became very popular. That really put Snake Theater on the map.
Well, I mean, when they were using the large puppets and stuff at the beginning on the beach and the gas station.
I thought, well, the most interesting thing is why not talk to the people who are inside the community and make them make the play, you know, make them be the sort of the input that comes at me, and then I toss this around and put it back. And that's where Antenna came from, and the whole idea was that antennas receive and transmit. You know, they take in information and they put it out.
Chris created what he called Walkmanology. He would take these interviews and weave them into a script that the audience would hear over headphones.
I had gotten a Walkman when I took off on the airplane because they were just new to Europe, and I listened to the Ride of the Valkyries as the airplane took off, and I said, oh wow, this is really synchronistic, you know, and I'm, and I said, you know, this is a theater tool. You know, this has got really amazing implications.
When I was on my back in my room watching my TV, I was taking an overload of static from just about everybody. I had to turn something off. So what was it going to be? Any one of these humanoids on the TV? Or me? It's my decision and I don't want to argue about it. I've done everything I could for you. Now it's time for me.
Very simple, affordable technology to create a very unique kind of theatrical experience.
It felt amazingly fresh and invented.
Both Snake and Antenna were in the Bay Area at a really exciting time. I mean, you know, there was George Coates, and there was, you know, Soon 3, and there was ongoing mime troupe. Then there was the Hawkeyes and the Angels of Light. It was all a gigantic mix of things, and right across the spectrum.